Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Lovelace. So glad to be here with you and with Fiona. Many of you know that we've spent quite a lot of time together working on a teaching routine for high frequency words. And we'd like to share that with you today, and specifically some elements that have to do with the teaching routine for you, the teachers, rather than the students today.
Because I think a lot of people are sharing routines for the students. And so that's fantastic. And out of our teaching routine will come some routines for the students. If you can just show me the next slide, Rebecca, I think I can speak to the fact that our teaching routine is really 3 points for you to keep in mind, that when you are wanting to teach students about high frequency words, we have these 3 points of anchor, analyze, and practice. And then this will lead to the skill of strengthening the students' understanding and usage of these really important words. So let's go into that in a little bit more detail, because each of these 3 big anchor points that we have, I'm saying the word anchor twice, these 3 big steps that we have are some subsections. And many spelling programs, and particularly those that advocate teaching high frequency words, traditionally anyway, just started and finished at the practice level. It was just writing the word, learning to read the word, flashcards, reading and writing the word. And yet we know that this doesn't tend to stick for children because there's no great connections to be made. And thankfully, we see a lot now starting to talk about the need to analyze the word for its grapheme phoneme connections, which is wonderful. But actually, what we've really discovered in our work with students is that unless we anchor the meaning of these words, we give a placeholder for the children to understand them, it's still quite a challenge. And so we would absolutely advocate for starting always with any study of high frequency words to show the word, write the word, and then use the word in a sentence. Have the children start to use those words.
Yeah, that's been a really powerful upgrade for me too in our working through this work. And then we take it a level deeper in our anchoring the meaning by looking at the tail of this word's history. So looking at the etymology, and we've written a bunch of very student, child appropriate level tales about the history of these words, because what those tales reveal are key elements of why a word is spelled the way it is, and also relationships to other words that they are linked to in meaning and spelling. And we believe this is really a much more effective way of teaching, to show these links between words and then strengthen the understanding of the initial word as well as several others.
So, this idea of playing the meaning game, where we have some words that are linked together, and then you start to see those relationships between those words. And you might have started with one word, but once you play the meaning game, it's like, oh, see the links to these other words, and then you might study them as a group. And then after we've sort of really anchored the meaning, it is important to analyze these words for not only their grapheme phoneme correspondences, but we want all students to look for the morphemic structures in words. So these words tend to be just a base. Occasionally we can add a suffix to them. Maybe they can be part of a compound, but we want to point out to the students that this word is a base, and then look for the phoneme grapheme correspondences, the links between the letters and the sounds, and make those really explicit to the students.
And in our routine and our resource, we have also written stories about looking even deeper into the letters. So those questions that we all have about, well, why is it this grapheme, or why is the word pronounced like this? So that's another layer that you can use to deepen a student's understanding as well as our own understanding. And this part becomes a bit of a dance. That's what we're going to talk about today, between looking at the tale, about the meaning, about anchoring the meaning in present day and in history, as well as looking at the phoneme grapheme correspondences and coming back and forth to explain why this word is spelled the way it is. So we're going to show you some examples of what we mean by this dance, weaving between anchoring the meaning of a word and analyzing the structure and the grapheme phoneme correspondences of that word.
Right. So both of these things have to happen before we practice. So coming back to that idea that the practice is coming after we have really developed a solid understanding of the word or the words.
So let's take a look at the word you, Y-O-U. And you will begin by anchoring the meaning, and you can have some fun with it. Asking students to use the word you in a sentence, and how do you define who you is? And they say it's you, and you say, no, it's me. We all have a good time thinking about that. And here's weaving a bit of that tale in here. In the history, the students can learn that thou was a form of the word you in several hundred years ago. And wouldn't it be funny if we did still say, would thou like to play with me? And so here we go into anchoring this meaning, telling the tale. Now, we have written this for access for a variety of students. So if I'm working with kindergartners, I'm maybe not going to share this entire tale or all of the information that's included here. I'm going to read it through myself first, think about who I'm working with, and choose the most salient points that will get across this understanding and still, hold their attention and keep them excited and involved. So that's part of the first part of this dance of the weaving. And here's actually an example of the look into the letters portion. So a lot of times this is talking about the phonemes and graphemes. Occasionally, there's actually a little bit of another tale in there. So we see about, words that typically don't end in just a single U. So in my lesson, I might choose to focus on this portion as part of the main anchoring, because this might be the most salient point in that moment. So you have some freedom and flexibility to read through yourself and consider, where you want to kind of guide that conversation. And so here's some photos of when I actually taught this a couple times, but in the left, I told the tale for you, and then we analyzed the word before we did the meaning game. So we looked at the phoneme grapheme correspondences, we tap spelled, we felt for phonemes, and then we played the meaning game. So that's a dance. We like to say we anchored the meaning, and then we analyzed, then we anchored further. Because that was a little bit important to realize, oh, there's an OU. Now let's talk about an OU.
And it helps, right, to see the other words that also have that OU. Of course, we trickily put the word youth in there. We found a word with OU and put that in there, but then you come back to, the meaning. Let's talk about the meaning of these words and how you and yours, I'll give it to you, it's your book, it's yours. They do seem to be very closely linked.
Yeah, and being able to craft your lesson, considering, okay, I might want to teach 3 words this week to my first graders. So, these will be a great set because they're so closely related. And, yours maybe isn't on your list, but it's right there. So why not take a look at it and bring it in and have students use it in sentences. You'll see on the left also, we had been studying pronouns the week before. So they had looked at she and her, give it to her, it's hers. So it was a nice transition both to reinforce and to teach this new form with you.
And I mean, I think that integration is so, that opportunity to integrate is so wonderful, because we don't always have, we never have enough time. And so you might have a set list of words that are your high frequency words, but if you can draw in others that are connected, then you are really strengthening the student's vocabulary at that same time. But Rebecca was saying that that you don't always have to read the whole story. And, the story of you is actually particularly long, and the story of people is particularly long. Some of our stories are much more succinct. They don't have as many twists and turns. But sometimes, depending on the age and stage of your students, they want the whole story. So I was working with some third or fourth graders last year looking at the word people. And they wanted the whole tale. They were fascinated by the twists and turns that this word has taken since its beginnings in Latin. And then looking at this other word, folk, which was around in Old English. So at times you can just read that whole story through, right from the start to the finish. And then, of course, this dance between analyzing and then going back to anchoring further. So it's sort of the two things are happening in concert because they help to explain each other.
Yeah, I love that. That's just the beauty of really deeply understanding these words, of having
Right.
those bits available.
Yeah, and so we have these steps: anchor, analyze, practice. But the anchor and analyze start with, of course, using the word, but then dance between those, all the things, all the components of anchoring the meaning and analyzing the word, because they work together. And then and only then do we get to the practice section. So practice, practice, practice. It will not stick unless you take the time to practice with the students. And conversely, if you don't do all of the stories and the explaining first, then for many students it doesn't stick either. So we need the combination of the two. So just a quick video here to show you how explicit you can be when you are requiring the students to practice. We have worked through this together, and practice should be short, sharp, and explicit. And you can be very direct, as you can see that I am being in this video. Here's what you're going to do now, because one thing I know for sure is that when we learn the story of a word that often is a little bit tricky to spell, if we don't practice, we don't remember it. And even if that word was easy for you to spell, if we don't practice it, we'll forget the story about what that O is doing there. So you have three things to do in a moment. We're going to go back out to talk about some things. You have three things. You can come to check on the board if you forget what they are. Number one, use the word people in a sentence. I think everyone can do that. Write a sentence about the word, we're using the word people. Number two, analyze it. Basically, copy this diagram here. It shows me it's a base. It tells me what the letters are doing. And number three, tell the tale. Write something that you remember about the story, and you could use some of these words to explain what the O is doing in the word people. Are there any questions?
I'm sorry, but when you were talking about the analyze part, I thought you were talking about the sentence. So I didn't.
So analyze means figuring out what the letters are doing. So I put an arrow here to show you can really copy this from the board, because that is telling me that these letters are pronounced. The ... means they're silent, and we talked about why they were silent. Yes.
What if you still don't get the story?
Then you do as good a job as you can. Okay, just as good a job as you can, because that's really helpful for your teacher. If you don't get the story and you write it down and we're like, oh, they didn't still quite get the story, that means I can come back and tell some more, because that's our job. We're teachers. So it's our job to help you to learn about all sorts of things. One of them is the spelling of words. To the point where you may have analyzed the word on the board with the students, and you might, for some students, leave that there, because then they are actually going and using that to make their own notes. At times you might want to erase that and see what can they remember already. Excuse me. At times you might want to put it on a small whiteboard, and for some students they get that extra scaffolding. Some students don't need it. That's the differentiation piece, I think. How much extra support do some students need in their practice, more than other students?
Yeah, for example, here's another student using our resource and just, here ready to focus on their handwriting and working through the spelling of that word. So there's just a little clip to watch.
Why? Oh, you.
Very nice. Can you tap spell it again on your arm? How do we spell you?
Why? Oh, you.
Spells?
You.
And as you can see in that last video, her handwriting, or the child's handwriting was wonderful. Their movement pathways were spot on, so that's going to lead to an efficient script. Whereas this is an example of a child who was doing their O's from the bottom to the top and backwards. And so taking the time to stop and work on the handwriting is not only going to be working on handwriting, but you're going to be anchoring the spelling of that word at the same time, or practicing the spelling of that word at the same time that the students are getting that repetition and practice. To start here.
I want to write look, and then I want to write in. And you need space between both.
Very good. So.
And here's just another look. Notice on the left, the child was practicing their word there, and it looks like, the proportion starts to get a bit off, but actually he let me know that he wanted to do an uppercase on purpose so that he would be prepared to use the word in a sentence. So it's so wonderful to be in dialogue with students while they're working, to hear their thinking and to see what they're noticing and what they truly understand. So that was just a wonderful little gift, and so great that he was thinking about that.
And you can see here a child just, the word is the, but the child was having trouble writing E. And so just taking the time to practice that letter shows you how you've got these lines for practicing. You can integrate your handwriting into there. And for some children for whom those letter pathways are already fixed and it's easy, then they can start writing some sentences using those words in sentences. And on the right here, the teacher explicitly teaching those movement pathways to the children, using the hand, the baseline, the X height.
And so here we are. What is the benefit of using this routine that we've just been talking about? Showing the connections between the words in your instructions. So this is, we hope, a technique you want to try out. It will really deepen your instruction, not only just looking at one word at a time, but making connections between words, using those words, anchoring their meaning. It's really bringing a lot of outcomes for the student. But this is something that you, I think, will feel the impact of how many elements that you're actually getting to in this one lesson. So weaving this dance through and then ending up at the practice.
And of course, this is to lead to these outcomes for our students so that they can understand and use these words, orally as well as in their writing. We want them to be able to read the words with automaticity, to write the words with automaticity. But beyond that, we want our students to be able to explain these words, including the relationship to other words. So in fact, this teaching routine of anchor, analyze, practice can be used way beyond high frequency words. With words that are sort of content words, then the anchoring the meaning also extends to finding the family. It's just high frequency words don't have many immediate family members, and so the meaning game helps us to see the relationship with sort of more distantly related words. But this routine of bearing in mind, I'm not just showing letter sound correspondences, but we need to anchor the meaning, and there's the numerous ways that we just explained for you to do that, as well as analyzing the words. So these 3 steps helps you to really help your students to understand, learn, and use these words.
Yeah, and for all students too, of all varying abilities, all in the same classroom, there are so many elements that, there's really something for any kind of student to take in.
That's a good point, because it's not just about being able to read and write the words. Oh, my students can already read and write it, but hearing the tale and looking more deeply into the letters and seeing the connections between other words, that's strengthening that student's understanding of our orthography, of how words work.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we think there's a lot to offer. If you are not so familiar and you want to take a look at how to understand all this information, you can hop on over to our website that hosts our teaching resource, the High Frequency Word Project. And we really hope that you have something here to take away with you into your next high frequency word lesson. Thanks.